in Australia, we've really had a lot of sort of luxurious complacency when it comes to growing our wealth, because
Yep.
we buy a property because we want one, and that just happens to be the right decision. And
Yeah.
if that is taken out, and then it's like, okay, if I'm not, making my long-term financial plans based on property ownership, what am I basing it on? And then most people, I don't know about you guys, but when I was in school, they didn't teach me anything about investing. They didn't teach me anything
No.
about, you know, an exchange traded fund, an index fund, a listed investment company, none of those things. But they're actually fairly easy to understand. You just need to like get over the hump. And so I feel like there's a real sort of educational issue that is in the way of people being a lot more comfortable with renting. But then I also think, Australia could do a lot better in terms of its rental rights and protections as well. Where if
Yeah.
you look in Europe, they have much longer term leases, and they
Yeah.
have no fault sort of evictions, and that you have the ability to make cosmetic changes. You can get a dog, all those kinds of things. Where it's like for some people, those are literally the reasons they buy a house, is because they want to be able to put up some artwork and get a dog, and
Yeah. Yeah.
and so if we just sort of like, if there is, to whatever extent there is a group of people who would be comfortable with renting, but for those, the educational and the rental rights issues, it's like, why aren't we doing those? So yeah, and again,
Yeah. Yeah.
this gets into that whole miasma of into this issue, and that represents a pocket of it. We don't know how big, but this is why to me it is like the Blob, like the old movie, where it's like you
Yes.
cut off a piece of it, it doesn't actually hurt it, it just keeps going. So you've got to kind of kill the whole blob,
Yeah. 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 Which is an absolutely monumental task.
Yeah,
So how do we do that, Riley?
well, honestly, I don't think we can. So and this is the
Right.
thing, it's like even if we did do that, that in itself, I think, wouldn't be without its consequences. You know what I mean? And
No.
it might, because you're really talking about fundamentally transforming the economy. And
Yes.
so it's like that's no joke. You know what I mean? Like that's a different paradigm going forward. I do think it would be better, because one of the points I make is that one of the issues with housing is that it sucks up every dollar in the economy, essentially, where everybody's entire net worth is poured into that one stagnant asset, and that houses don't really do anything beyond artificial scarcity and just relying on society's perception of their wealth to accumulate over time. And so what I sort of say is, like, there's a huge opportunity cost sort of hidden beneath that around, what would society look like if we actually freed up all that money to be invested in productive things that actually create innovation and wealth. Because another huge drawback of our housing crisis that nobody talks about, which is that we have one of the least economically complex economies in the world. We're behind Uganda and Senegal in economic complexity, which means that we're really
One
vulnerable.
trick pony.
Yeah, we've got mining, we've got like higher education, and everything else is just kind of us like making websites for each other, and like, you know what I mean? And this is why they bring in so much immigration, is because they're wanting to just keep the demand high for all these services that don't actually like bring in raw wealth like a place like Vietnam does, for example, which actually sells stuff to the world. So if we actually weren't pouring all this money into one set of stagnant asset classes, what could our country be? That's like an open question.